so we've got the list of things that we're gonna kind of talk about today. We'll talk a little bit about limited agency here real quick. So limited agency is when you're representing both sides of the deal. There's a common misconception that limited agency is when two people from the same business, same firm, same office, same, were to represent a client. That's called an in-house deal when you have two people. So if Robin and I are working on a deal together, she's on one side, I'm on the other, that's an in-house deal. It's not limited agency. I'm not representing both parties, okay? She's actually gonna be the one representing the one party. I'm gonna represent the other. We just have to be careful not to do anything stupid, right? And give up some of the things that we've agreed to with our clients, right? Agency is keeping track of paperwork. Agency is keeping them from experiencing significant financial loss that they shouldn't have. It's keeping things confidential. It's always fighting for their best interest, okay? And that last one there is the one that I feel like is the most difficult in what we're gonna call limited agency. You might hear it said at times, call it, what's the other word that some states use? Not limited, but I can't remember. It's all right. We call it limited agency here in Indiana. I think it's a great word for it because you are severely limited in your capacity to attack the other person, in my opinion. So I stay away from it as much as I can. I've done it. Depending on how the deal goes, you kind of feel dirty the whole time, in my opinion, so I would stay away from it. But limited agency is where you represent the buyer and the seller, okay? There's a form that you would have to fill out that both of them have to sign that says, hey, we're all aware now that I'm representing both sides. That form is going to be found in zip forms called limited agency agreement, something like that, and you're going to have them sign it. When in your mind should we sign, or when do you remember being told that you should sign that document? When should that happen?
Before you do any kind of work with them.
All right, what her answer is Erica. Her answer was before you do any work with them. That's 100% correct, okay? It's before you do anything. So
buyers, like before we sign like the buyer's exclusive or
yeah, that would go right alongside with a buyer's exclusive agency. Yep. So, but like showing them a house prior to signing that, no good. Same with your listing. Like if you're at the listing, they need to sign it before you show that house too for the client that you're working. This is going to happen. The more business that you're doing, you're going to have, say 5 or 10 listings sitting out there, and then you're going to have 5 or 10 buyers you're working with, and you're going to run into your listings. I mean, it's happened to me where I almost created a circle of 3 houses, right? I had a listing, they were buying a house I had listed, and then I was getting another listing to buy the other house that we had, the first house that I had listed. So we didn't end up doing it. One of them ended up connecting, and I stayed away from limited agency on it. I actually had somebody else work the buyer. So limited agency is important because it's never when things go right that people have trouble, right? It's not when it's like this easy to see win-win-win situation. And as I don't know if you guys seen The Office, Michael Scott's win-win-win situation. Don't end up winning for anybody, but with this win-win situation, if that doesn't occur, that's when people start getting mad. Oh, well, he was working for the other person. I'm literally in a text feed right now with me and Josh, my customer service guy. He and me and another client are in a text feed right now where the client feels like they contacted us. I have no idea who it is. We're not trying to garner their business because we can't interfere. Realtor rules, not Indiana law rules, but realtor rules, which we all are realtors. Once you're in MIBOR, you're by default one if you've gone to the class. If not, they'll kick you out of MIBOR. So realtor ethics rules says you cannot interfere with the exclusive agency of another client-agent relationship. So a listing agent and a buyer agent, a listing agent and a client, you can't interfere. I can't go market to that listing guy and say, listen, when this is all over, you ought to come see me. You can't market to a buyer's agency exclusive agreement. If I know they have a signed buyer's exclusive agency, I can't go if they're just showing them a home every now and then and they're not really that big a deal and it's not an exclusive agency agreement, they're just talking to them about the listing or they're just talking to them about showing houses, steal away. You might use some common sense there because you're gonna get some phone calls if you do it wrong, or if it's like their mom, or if it's something right, you're gonna get some phone calls. But so anyway, that's agencies about that. And the problem is with limited agency, where I'm not saying you can't do them. I've done them. I'm saying be very, very, very careful because you do not want to get yourself caught in a situation where you are perceived, even if you're not really, perceived to be working for the other guy harder than you're working for them. And here's the situation that I feel like it comes in the most play. It comes in the most play, this whole, because I like to think of it in this like kind of, Raymond Modulin, I use this saying, and he actually coined the phrase, I do it naturally, so I don't know, we're good for each other. He says, always use the asinine example. Like, when you're looking for clarity, go to the crazy end extreme and see what happens then. Because a lot of times it becomes much clearer. And so, use the example that you've got a listing that has now been, and you have a buyer, and you're working them both. You're trying, you get to inspections, and the seller obviously wants to sell their house, and you're doing everything you can in theory to negotiate and sell and get as little repairs and as little money out of their pocket and all that for them. On this side, you've got a buyer who wants as much as they can get from them from repairs and as much financial, if they're not going to do repairs, as much back as they can on that end. So how in the world do you expect, being like this great human being, to honestly be able to turn around with your friend who you're listing their house for, and your other friend who you're helping buy a home? They just happen to converge on a house. They don't know each other. How are you going to be able to, honest to goodness, help either one of them, like literally attack, and I use that word as the asinine example, attack the other person? You're not, it's virtually impossible to really say, let's go get them. Let's take them for everything they're worth. Because that's what you're supposed to be doing for your client. So that's why the limited agency is scary to me. Because now, which one of these two, whoever loses in a really rough deal, is going to feel like you didn't work real hard for them. You were working for the buyer. You were working for the seller. This client that I'm talking to right now that I mentioned is saying their client is working for the builder. They feel like, their agent. They feel like their agent. I'm not talking about the guy sitting in the office. I'm talking about their actual agent took them to the new build site. It's all gone to hell in a handbasket, and this lady wants to get out of the deal. I feel like my agent just wants to get the closing done. They're not working for me. They're not helping me fight the builder. They're not, and that's not a limited agency, but that's definitely what you don't want to experience when you're in limited agency. Like, that's even worse when you're in limited agency and your client feels that way. So there is a form. So there's a couple places you're going to notate that this is limited agency. First of all, in your listing contract, it says, I can do limited agency, and you're aware of it, but I'm going to disclose it to you. Okay? It doesn't say, I'll ask you again. Okay? It says, I can do limited agency, and I'm not going to, but I've got to disclose it to you. On your buyer's exclusive agency, it says, I can do limited agency, but I have to disclose it to you. On your office policy, it talks about limited agency. So we've already talked about it multiple times. Both people got the office policy. Both people, buyer exclusive agency and listing exclusive right to sell, those both have talked about limited agency at some level. And remember, the written office policy is what levels the playing field. It describes what agency is, where these two just said the words. Limited agency is okay, So, first of all, those are three places limited agencies already talked about and already kind of been signed off on it's okay to do. But we have another form, and in Indiana you're supposed to have it filled out, which is a limited agency agreement that says, before I do anything engaging these two people at the same time on the same property, I've got to say, seller 1 and seller 2 and buyer 1 agree, seller 1 and buyer 1 agree that Eli is representing both parties almost as a neutral French, doesn't really care who wins or loses, matter of fact doesn't want anybody to win or lose, wants wants everybody to just be friends, and I'm really working at some level, the transaction becomes my client. Okay, now, I don't know if that's really legally what you would say, because they're your clients and that's the problem. But as a limited agent, the transaction becomes your client. So getting them through the transaction, you want to do what? Okay, great, boom, we do it. Okay, you want to do what to that counter? Boom, do that. You do this stuff. But now, it's going to be really hard knowing that your seller told you, I'd be happy to take anything over $180,000. And these people are saying, I'd like to offer 190, I'd like to offer 175, and you can't, I know they're not, I don't think they'll take that. You can't do that anymore, like, cause how would you know that? You would only know that if now you might say that to other clients, like, you know what, that's 50,000 below on a $150,000 house that's in perfect condition. I doubt they'll take that, but we could try. You could certainly say like stuff like that, but the reality is you can't let them know that you know. My common phrase is, I don't really know, they haven't told me. I don't typically ask my clients to tell me that information because I don't want to know it, because I don't want to accidentally mess this up, but even if I did know it, I wouldn't be able to tell you. That's what I tell people all the time. I don't know, I don't ask my clients for that type of information anyway, and if I did know, I couldn't tell you anyway. That's kind of my go-to phrase in a situation where we're working like that, but, so, it's tricky, but those first three places are where it's done. Then you go to that limited agency agreement where it discloses again, hey, we're gonna do this, and then the transaction becomes your client almost at some level, and that's the rub, because now, remember when I said you feel dirty? You start to feel dirty, because if the transaction's your client, what does it feel like the whole time that you're trying to do? You've all heard it. He's just trying to get the deal done. And you're like, kind of by definition now, I'm actually just trying to get the deal done. And that's why limited agency is difficult. But disclosure, disclosure, disclosure. I've screwed this up. You're running 100 miles an hour, you got a buyer, you show up at your listing, and you're just, I don't know, it's weird. It's happened. It's happened multiple times to me, and I have to constantly be on point to try and remember to disclose that. And it's really hard when they're like, hey, I'd like to go see this house, and it's in 30 minutes. How in the world are you supposed to get signatures on limited agency paper in 30 minutes? Right? You're calling yourself, hey, I'm about to show your house to one of my buyers. Are you cool with that? Yes. Great. I got emails out to you right now for signatures. They sign it. Typically at that point, I'll just, if I haven't already signed stuff with my buyers, they print it out and take it right there on the car. Hey, before we go in, I have to have you sign this. Great question. Yeah. Yep. Open houses. Great question. So if you're at an open house on your listing and you have a buyer want to make a move at any level beyond, like we're looking at the house, they start asking you real estate questions where you feel like there's a chance if something went wrong, like, okay, like they walk away from here, something goes wrong, would they say, well, that guy was my agent? That's called implied agency, right? Implied agency. You might be filling out a form for them. You might be just talking real estate strategy with them. You might be, heck, just being their friend in an open house. All of a sudden, they feel like you're their agent. It becomes pretty obvious. I mean, it's going to be hard to argue. I'm not their agent. Well, you filled out a purchase agreement for them. Like, you know, well, no, they're buying on their own. Well, if they're buying on their own without an agent and you fill out the purchase agreement, now you're practicing law because you're working through contracts now as a real estate agent. That's illegal. So either you're their agent or you practice law without a license. Which one is it? And both of them are bad answers at that point. So when you're in an open house, somebody wants to make a move, you start, you'll feel yourself getting into, you'll be getting excited because you got a client. You're getting a client, you all feel that coming on. That's when, if it's our listing we're dealing with, hey, before we go much further, I need you to sign this because I'm all about disclosure. I'm all about letting everybody know everything. But I actually am the listing agent's client or agent as well. I can't tell you, I'll keep their stuff to them, I'll keep your stuff to you, but are we cool with this, or should I find you another agent inside our company that could handle this deal better for you? That's how you do it. the excitement in your gut that you're about to get a client and you're talking a lot about this house and you're gonna write an offer on that, on your listing, that's when you have to get that filled out. It is gonna be really hard, cause it is definitely some crossover, it's difficult, that's not gonna happen as often, you know, but it's definitely, as you have a bunch of buyers and you've got a bunch of listings. But the difference between that and an in-house is so much easier. In-house is what I count on constantly when I've got, you know, 10 or 12 listings sitting out there. I'm looking for my buyer's agents who are working 10 of my buyer's agents to come in. Now, my team writes under my number, okay, with the exception that they're on my listing. So Gina, right, she's showing Bob houses. And if she writes an offer on one of those houses, she writes it as Eli Skinner. I sign the documents. I am his agent. She is literally just showing houses and helping him facilitate the transaction in my place. That's how a team works. If she comes to my listing, she's now the buyer's agent. So she is going to write her number and she's going to sign the documents, all that, because I don't want to be in the limited capacity. I want her and her client at that point to be able to fight my people hard. And I want to be able to fight back real hard and not feel bad, okay? So that's in-house. In-house does not need disclosure. In-house is not illegal. In-house is much simpler, but you do have to be careful that you're not talking about the transaction. You can't still be, you gotta be careful, okay? So, limited agency, in-house agency, any other questions on that? There's a lot to that. Go back and listen to the video if you have any questions.